It was 3:15 a.m. when the call came in, and at that hour, most people are fast asleep. But not me. I was a patrol officer, still wide awake, half drunk on caffeine and the adrenaline that always pulses through my veins when the city falls silent. Unit 12, we got a 10 to 50, possible 10 to 33 at the old warehouse on 12th, respond ASAP. My heart skipped. I knew that warehouse. The place had been abandoned for years, but every now and then, rumors swirl. People go in, kids, thrill seekers, but they don't always come out. They say it's haunted, but I don't believe in that crap. Or at least, I didn't. I glanced at my partner, Michael. He raised an eyebrow, already grabbing his flashlight and gearing up. "Let's get this over with," he muttered. "It's gonna be one of those nights." The old streets looked like they always did, drenched in a grayish fog, the kind that seemed to suck the life out of everything around it. We pulled up near the warehouse, the sound of the engine humming like a low growl in the dead quiet. There were no signs of movement, but I could feel something off. I always thought I had a good instinct for these things, but as I stepped out of the car, it hit me hard. The cold didn't feel natural. It wasn't the crisp air of a late-night shift. It was wrong. Like the chill of something that shouldn't be there. "You hear that?" Michael's voice snapped me out of my thoughts. I paused. There was a faint sound. A scraping noise, like metal on concrete. It was coming from inside the warehouse. "Probably just a rat or something," I said, though my own voice trembled slightly. We moved closer, both of us staying low. I could see the outline of the warehouse through the mist. The door, usually locked tight, was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness waiting for us. My hand hovered over my gun, the weight of it oddly comforting. We stepped inside. The smell hit me first, stale air, damp, almost metallic, like something had been rotting in there for a long time. The scraping sound was louder now, echoing off the concrete walls, sending a chill down my spine. "Stay sharp," I whispered to Michael, who was already a few steps ahead of me, his flashlight cutting through the thick darkness. We crept deeper into the warehouse, my boots grinding against the cracked floor. The place was cavernous, the beams overhead sagging under the weight of years of neglect. Broken windows, shattered glass littering the ground, and piles of debris scattered everywhere. It felt like the kind of place you wouldn't want to be alone in after dark. Another scraping noise, but this time it was closer, right behind us. I spun around, heart racing, but there was nothing there. Just the shadows, stretching in ways that didn't make sense. I felt my skin crawl. "Mike, did you hear that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. But he didn't answer. I turned back to him, but he was standing still, staring into the darkness with a vacant expression. His flashlight flickered, and for a split second, I saw something moving in the corner of my eye. A shape, tall, thin, and wrong. "Michael?" I reached out to grab his shoulder, but my hand froze before I touched him. The air around him felt dense, almost suffocating. Suddenly, his body jerked, snapping back to life. He turned to me with wide, panicked eyes. "We need to get out. Now." His voice cracked, and that's when I knew. He wasn't scared of some homeless guy or junkie hiding out in the warehouse. This was something else. Something real. I didn't even have time to ask what he meant before he took off, running towards the exit. I followed instinctively, heart pounding in my chest, but when I reached the door, it slammed shut in front of me. I pulled at the handle. Locked. Shit. I looked around, desperate. There was no way we were trapped in here. There had to be another exit, another way out. I spun around, trying to figure out where Michael had gone, but there was only silence now. The scraping sound had stopped. But now there was something else. A low, guttural hum. Like a voice. A whisper. "Help me. The voice echoed from somewhere deep in the dark, distorted and warped, as if it came from the walls themselves. I froze. I stood there, frozen. The whisper echoed again, more distinct this time. "Help me." It came from the far end of the warehouse, deeper in the shadows. I felt a cold sweat break out across my neck, my breath shallow and ragged. The air felt heavier now, like it was pressing down on me, suffocating me. Michael was nowhere to be seen, but the door I had just tried to open remained locked, unyielding. There had to be another exit. There always was in places like this. I wasn't about to be stuck here, not with whatever the hell was happening. I took a deep breath and, despite every nerve in my body screaming at me to run, I moved towards the source of the whisper. Each step felt like it took forever, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, alert to every sound in the dark. My flashlight flickered as I moved, casting long, creeping shadows across the walls, making the place look even more sinister. I reached a narrow hallway at the back of the warehouse, barely wide enough for me to turn around in. The hum was louder now, vibrating in my chest like it was coming from inside the walls. I reached out, pressing my hand against the cold surface, hoping for some sign that I wasn't completely losing it. Then I heard it. A low, scraping noise. Right behind me. I spun around, gun drawn. My heart was hammering in my chest, and the flashlight bounced erratically across the walls, but there was nothing. The hallway stretched on, endless and empty. I was losing my mind. But then the whisper came again, clearer this time. "Help me. Please." It wasn't a voice. It was more like a thought, something that seemed to seep into my head, making me feel like I was being drawn in. "Who are you?" I shouted into the darkness, trying to steady my trembling hands. "What the hell do you want?" The only answer was silence. But just as I was about to take another step, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. There, at the far end of the hallway, was Michael. His eyes were wide, glazed over, staring at nothing. He was standing completely still, his body unnaturally rigid, like a mannequin frozen in place. He didn't even blink. "Michael?" I called out, my voice strained, but he didn't respond. He didn't move. It was then I saw it, something was crawling out from behind him, slithering along the floor like a shadow made of darkness itself. I took a hesitant step forward, my flashlight shaking in my hand, but the beam of light barely seemed to penetrate the thick darkness surrounding Michael. The thing that was slithering toward him was so subtle at first, like a long, fluid shadow stretching across the floor, its shape constantly shifting as though it was made of the night itself. It was moving with an unnatural speed, its form twisting, reaching toward Michael like it had some kind of unholy intent. "Michael!" I yelled, this time louder, more desperate, but there was no reaction. It was like he was in some kind of trance, completely unaware of the thing crawling toward him. The shadow-like entity reached Michael's legs, wrapping around them as if it were a sentient coil, and for a moment, I thought I saw something flash, a pair of eyes, cold and lifeless, in the blackness of the figure. I took another step forward, but the moment I did, the thing froze. The air became thick and charged, like a static charge building up. The hairs on my neck stood on end, and I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me. My heart was pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. I was suffocating, trapped in some kind of invisible vice. "Michael!" I screamed, but still, he didn't move. I couldn't just leave him there, even though every instinct in me told me to run, get out, get to safety. I wasn't thinking clearly anymore. The darkness seemed to be alive, pressing in from all sides, and I knew that if I didn't do something, we'd both be swallowed by it. I sprinted forward, grabbing Michael by the shoulders and shaking him violently. "Mike, come on, snap out of it." Suddenly, his body jerked, his head snapping up to look at me with wide, unblinking eyes. But there was nothing human in them. No recognition. Just pure, unrelenting emptiness. Before I could react, he opened his mouth, but it wasn't his voice that came out. It was a distorted, rasping hiss. "Get out, leave this place." And then, in the blink of an eye, the thing, whatever it was, wrapped itself around Michael's torso, dragging him backward into the shadows. His body spasmed, his mouth opened in a silent scream, but there was nothing I could do. I was paralyzed, watching him vanish into the dark. Then, all at once, the warehouse seemed to come alive. The floor beneath me vibrated with some unseen force. The walls groaned, and the whispering voices returned, louder now, all around me. The room began to close in on me, like it was constricting, suffocating me. I had to get out. I couldn't breathe. The air was so thick it felt like I was trying to inhale through a wet cloth. I staggered back, trying to take control of my body, my thoughts, but everything was spinning. The whispering voices were getting louder, filling every corner, crawling into my skull, making me feel like I was losing my mind. "Get out, leave this place." I heard Michael's voice again, but it wasn't him. It was something else, twisted and hollow. The voice reverberated in the walls, in the very ground beneath my feet. My flashlight flickered, casting strange, disorienting shadows on the broken warehouse floor. I had to move. I had to get out. There was no time to think. My hands were shaking as I pulled at the door again, my heart racing. I had no idea where Michael was anymore, whether he was still alive or if that thing had taken him. There was no sign of him. No sound, no movement. Just darkness. The door remained locked, but then I remembered something. The back exit. The one I had passed earlier. It was a long shot, but it was all I had. I turned, running without thinking. My footsteps echoed in the cavernous space, the sound of my boots scraping against the cold concrete more deafening than the whispers now. I didn't care if I was running toward more danger. I didn't care about anything except getting the hell out of there. I reached the back hallway, the one I had barely noticed before. The flashlight beam barely illuminated anything ahead, but it was a straight shot. I sprinted down it, pushing myself faster than I had ever moved before. Then, I heard it. A loud crash, followed by a shriek that sent chills down my spine. I whipped around, but the corridor behind me was empty. Nothing but the darkness, stretching out like an endless void. I couldn't stop. I couldn't let whatever that thing was catch me. I had no idea what it was, but I knew one thing for sure, it wasn't human. I reached the back door. It was rusted, the metal groaning as I shoved against it with all my strength. Finally, the door creaked open, and a burst of cold night air hit me. The city was still silent, but it didn't matter. The warehouse was behind me now, and I had to get as far away as possible. I took a few steps into the open, panting, but then I froze. Standing across the street was Michael. But it wasn't really him. His body was bent at an impossible angle, his arms hanging limply at his sides. His face, or what was left of it, was a distorted mask, eyes sunken and hollow, lips pulled back in an eerie grin. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking past me, into the darkness of the warehouse. And then I heard it, low, quiet, but unmistakable. The sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Someone, or something, was coming. I felt my legs freeze as I stared at Michael, or what was left of him. The figure in front of me was a shell, a grotesque imitation of the man who had once been my partner. His body trembled unnaturally, his movements jerking like a marionette. That horrifying, grinless smile stretched wider as he slowly raised his head, and his hollow eyes met mine. But it wasn't Michael's soul looking at me. It was something far worse, something that had overtaken him. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end as an overwhelming, instinctual terror gripped my chest. "Run," Michael's voice rasped, but it wasn't his. The words crawled out of him, like something dragging itself across my skin. I couldn't tear my eyes away, and for a moment, I just stood there. It felt like the entire world had stopped. But then, slowly, I began to hear the footsteps behind me again, getting closer. Each step made the ground tremble beneath me, the sound of something heavy moving toward me with an unnatural slowness. I spun around, looking for any escape route. My heart pounded in my ears, the blood rushing in my head, drowning out the whispers that still echoed from the warehouse. It was too much. I had to get away. I ran, tearing my eyes away from Michael's twisted form. But just as I was about to bolt down the alley, I heard it again. A voice, low and menacing, sliding into my mind. "You can't escape." I stumbled, my feet tangling, and I fell hard onto the cold asphalt. The flash of pain cut through me, but it wasn't enough to stop the dread that had settled like a weight on my chest. Something was closing in on me, and I could feel it in the very air I breathed. The footsteps behind me were louder now, almost deafening. It was too close. I scrambled to my feet, my heart hammering faster, louder, as if it, too, was trying to outrun whatever was pursuing me. As I turned back toward the alley, I saw him, Michael, moving inhumanly fast, his twisted form chasing me down. He was no longer human. His body contorted as he sped toward me, his arms outstretched, fingers curled like claws, reaching for me. I didn't look back. I couldn't. My legs were carrying me on pure instinct, the world blurring around me. The sound of Michael's distorted breath, mixed with the heavy thuds of something else chasing behind him, echoed in my mind. I ran. And I ran. The sound of the chase faded for a moment, but I knew it wasn't over. The fear didn't stop. It was in my bones, in my soul, gnawing at me as I bolted through the streets. Finally, I saw a light in the distance, headlights cutting through the dark. A car. I was so close. I had no choice. I dove toward the street, waving my arms, shouting for help. The car screeched to a halt in front of me, and the door flew open. A man, terrified but willing to help, reached out and pulled me inside. I slammed the door shut, panting, blood pumping in my ears, but as the car sped away from the warehouse, I looked through the rearview mirror. There was nothing. But then, just as I thought I was safe, I saw something flicker in the reflection. A shadow. A twisted face. And Michael's hollow, lifeless eyes staring back at me. The car sped through the dark streets, the tires screeching against the pavement, but no matter how fast we went, the fear didn't fade. My heart was still pounding in my chest, my hands slick with sweat, and every time I glanced out the rearview mirror, I half expected to see Michael, or whatever was left of him, right behind us, chasing us, coming for me. But the streets remained empty. The darkness outside seemed to press against the windows, as though trying to keep the truth hidden from view. The man driving, a stranger whose name I hadn't even asked, kept glancing nervously at me, unsure of what had just happened, but he didn't say anything. He didn't need to. I could feel the terror in his silence. He was as trapped in the moment as I was. The road stretched on, the headlights casting long shadows on the deserted street. "Are you okay?" he asked, breaking the silence after what felt like an eternity. I couldn't answer. How could I? How could I explain what I had just seen? The grotesque thing that had taken Michael. The whispers, the feeling of being hunted by something I couldn't even comprehend. I was numb. My mouth felt dry, like I had swallowed gravel. I couldn't speak. The car finally came to a stop at a red light, and for a split second, I thought I saw movement in the darkness ahead. A figure, standing still at the edge of the street. It was just a fleeting shadow, and the light turned green, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it had been more than a trick of the eyes. "Let's just get out of here," I muttered under my breath, barely recognizing my own voice. It sounded distant, like it was coming from someone else. The driver nodded, and we kept going. We passed the outskirts of town, heading into the residential area. But even here, in the relative safety of streetlights and houses, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Something had followed us. I looked out the side window again. And there it was, a figure moving swiftly through the darkness, too fast, too fluid to be human. It was tall, too tall, like it was gliding along the ground instead of walking. "Stop the car!" I shouted, panic rising in my throat. "Stop the damn car!" The driver slammed on the brakes, but before we could even process what was happening, the car was jolted forward. A heavy weight crashed against the back of it, sending us both forward in our seats. I gasped, heart pounding. Something had slammed into the car, something big, something that wasn't supposed to be there. I whipped my head around, but the rearview mirror was empty. The car was now eerily still. I didn't care if the driver was scared. I didn't care about anything anymore. I knew I wasn't getting out of this without facing it. The thing that had taken Michael, the thing that had haunted this place, was still out there. And it wasn't finished with me. The car lurched forward again, but this time I felt it. The heavy weight pushing against the back, forcing us forward as if some unseen hand was trying to pull us into the depths of the night. I could hear the rattling of the trunk, the sounds of metal scraping against metal. Whatever it was there. The driver panicked, slamming his foot on the gas pedal. "What the hell is that?" he shouted, his voice trembling with fear. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I knew exactly what it was. It was the thing from the warehouse, the shadow that had taken Michael. It was here, with us, and it wasn't going to stop until it had me. I looked around, desperate. We were still on a quiet road, but it felt like we were miles away from safety. The streets were empty, and the houses on either side were dark, lifeless. No one was awake. No one was there to help. "Stop the car!" I screamed again, but the driver was too far gone in his own panic to hear me. He was looking in the rearview mirror, his hands trembling on the wheel. I turned to look, just in time to see it, a shadow, moving fast, crossing the street behind us, too large to be a person. It was gaining on us. My heart hammered in my chest as I reached for the door handle, my mind spinning with a single thought: I have to get out. I have to survive. But the moment I touched the handle, the car was slammed again, this time harder. The entire vehicle jerked to the side, throwing me against the door. I gasped, my breath stolen by the force of the impact. My head spun as I tried to regain my bearings, but the shadow in the rearview mirror was getting closer, and closer. The driver screamed, his voice high-pitched and frantic. "What the hell is that?" I turned to him, my eyes wide with terror. "It's not real. It's not human." Before I could finish, the rear window shattered. Something crashed through, its long, skeletal fingers reaching in, grabbing for him. The man didn't have time to scream. His body was pulled back with a force I couldn't comprehend, disappearing into the dark. I screamed in horror, slamming my body into the front seat, trying to shield myself, but there was no escape. I could feel its presence now, right behind me, its cold breath brushing against my neck. I knew then that if I didn't act, I wouldn't make it. It was going to take me, too. I grabbed the gun from the glove compartment, Michael's gun, and with trembling hands, I spun around, aiming for the shadow. My eyes locked onto the blackness that had now filled the back of the car, and I squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out, deafening in the confined space. For a moment, everything went still. But then, to my horror, I saw it. The thing was still there. The bullet had passed through it, but it hadn't stopped it. The creature was composed of darkness, its body was fluid, like smoke, constantly shifting and reforming. It didn't bleed. It didn't feel pain. And as I watched in frozen terror, I realized there was only one way to survive this nightmare: I had to destroy it. But how? The shadow reached for me, its claws closing in, and I knew I had only one chance left. I knew there was no way out. No escape. My hands were shaking as I raised the gun again, but deep down, I knew it wasn't going to stop it. I could feel it, it knew I was scared. The creature thrived on that fear, and I had given it everything I had. But in that moment, something strange happened. The shadow hesitated. Just for a second. I wasn't sure why, but I felt a sudden spark of clarity. My terror faded just a little, replaced by a surge of defiance. I wasn't going to die here. Not like this. Not at the hands of some creature born from darkness. The shadow loomed closer, but as it did, something caught my eye, something strange, something almost human in its shape. There was a flicker, a weakness in the dark mass, like it was shifting. It was vulnerable, somehow. In a split second, I understood. I didn't need to shoot it. I needed to destroy the source of its power. The warehouse. The place where it had first come to life. It was tethered to that place, bound by whatever cursed force had awakened it. Without thinking, I ripped my seatbelt off and dove for the door. The creature screeched in response, its claws tearing through the air, but I was already out of the car, stumbling into the street, running as fast as I could. I didn't know if it was chasing me or not. I didn't dare look back. My mind raced as I ran through the dark streets, my breath ragged, feet pounding the pavement. The warehouse had to be just up ahead. I could feel it, the connection. It wasn't just Michael that it wanted. It wanted me. It wanted anyone who stepped too close. I turned the corner, and there it was. The warehouse. Looming over me like a dark giant, its broken windows staring at me like hollow eyes. The air around it was thick, almost suffocating. The temperature dropped sharply, and I could feel the weight of the evil inside pressing down on me. I knew what I had to do. I raced toward the front door, the one that had been locked earlier. This time, I didn't stop. I slammed my shoulder against it, the wood splintering with a loud crack. I didn't care about the noise. I didn't care about anything except getting to the heart of it. Inside, the place was even darker, colder. The air was thick with rot, and I could hear that faint, scraping noise again. But this time, it wasn't distant. It was close. Too close. I sprinted deeper into the warehouse, the ground beneath me shaking with every step. I had no plan. No strategy. But I knew I couldn't let it pull me back into its twisted grip. And then I saw it. The shadow. It was hovering in the center of the warehouse, its tendrils reaching out like claws. Its blackness swallowed the light, turning everything around it into a void. I reached for the gun again. My last chance. But before I could raise it, I felt the air shift behind me. A presence, cold and suffocating. I turned. There, standing in the doorway, was Michael. Or what was left of him. His body was twisted and broken, barely human anymore. His mouth opened, and the same distorted voice echoed from deep within him, "Leave, now." I couldn't take it. I couldn't stay. In that instant, I remembered something, the light. The streetlights outside. The flash of headlights I had seen earlier. It wasn't the darkness that had power here. It was the light. The light was the enemy of the shadow. I had to bring it into the light. With every ounce of energy I had left, I rushed toward the nearest window. I didn't care if it was broken. I didn't care about the glass or the pane. I threw my shoulder into it, shattering it with a loud crash. And then, nothing. The darkness recoiled. It hesitated. For one brief, final moment, it seemed to shrink back, as if it was being pulled away by something far beyond my understanding. Michael's form flickered once more, and then, like a nightmare in the light, it vanished. The warehouse went silent. The shadows pulled back into the corners. The air was still. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, panting, trying to steady my breath. The light from outside shone through the shattered window, casting its glow over the cold, abandoned space. And for the first time, I could hear myself think. I had survived. The thing, whatever it had been, was gone. And as I stepped back from the window, I looked at the emptiness around me. There was no more sound. No more whispers. But the feeling that something was watching me, waiting, never fully left. It was always there, lingering in the back of my mind. And maybe that was the worst part of all. Because I knew deep down, that thing wasn't gone for good. It was still out there. And it would wait.